The death toll from the Maui wildfires has reached nearly 100 and is expected to climb far higher in what is now considered the deadliest wildfire in the United States in a century. It's clear the fire is Hawaii's worst natural disaster. The blaze decimated the historic town of Lahaina, which once served as the capital of the Hawaiian kingdom, as it spread at a rate of a mile every minute, propelled by wind gusts from Hurricane Dora hundreds of miles away. A lawsuit filed against the utility, Hawaiian Electric, alleges electrified power lines blown over by the high winds helped the wildfire spread at such a rapid pace, and that the company should have de-energized these power lines after a high wind alert. This is a survivor of the fire named Akaneziva, describing how her family got stuck in traffic while trying to escape the ferocious flames. She was with her husband and 3 kids, aged 15, 13, and 9. They recorded part of their experience on a cell phone as the blue skies around them turned gray, then black.
This here is where we were at before we made the decision, because this is the electrical that lit up in flames. So that's my husband in the passenger seat, because he kept getting in and out to hose down small fires that were starting. Just from our parking stall to the entrance of our apartment complex. It went from blue skies to gray to black. And all we seen was embers from fire that we had no idea what's going on. There was no siren, nothing. And I mean, it was just heartbreaking seeing our community, my neighbors, like lots of elderly people, trying to make it down the stairs just to get into their car. And out of nowhere, this fire jumped from the parking structure over to a tree and then onto an electric post. By then, we were right next to that electric post. And as a mom, I mean, so many things are going through my mind. Cars are panicking. And I have it on video where my son was, in the video, he's like, "Oh, Mom, it's hot. I can feel it." So instantly I'm telling my husband, I need a reverse. I need a reverse. We need to get out and run. Everything's coming so quick. We could feel the heat. It's sitting in our car. And out of nowhere, I just hear banging on this window. And everything's dark, so I look to my left, and I'm literally right next to this car where this grandmother is yelling for help, and she's just telling me, "Please help me, I have a baby." And I just, at that time, I'm like, what do I do? So of course I jump out, I tell my husband, "You tend to the grandma, I'm grabbing the baby." I run out, I run around her car, open up the back, the baby's on her side. Right behind her, I reach over, I grab this baby. She was about 2.5, 3 years old. I grabbed her, she was sitting on a blanket. I wrapped her with the blanket, and I told my kids, "You guys run. Don't turn around and look for me." And my 9-year-old couldn't. She just kept telling me, "Mom, I can't. Please, Mom." This is the car where we saved the baby from. We took out running this way. Ran out this way, right here to the corner. There's a fence that Mona and my husband and the neighbor bent to get everybody to safety. We were all hiding behind this wall here. We run to the corner and we meet up with a few pets there, our neighbors. There's about a good 9 of us. We meet there and we just notice that we're at a dead end. We're at a dead end and we're just standing there. We have our backs to this building and we're looking at each other and we're like, my son was like, "Oh, Mom, is this it?" And I mean, what do you tell your kids? And I told my kids, if it is, my husband told him, if it is, thank you, Lord. Thank you, God. Thank you for my family. Oh, Lahaina's home. I mean, so many times I tell myself, I need to get off this rock. The moment I'm in the air, I'm homesick. I mean, being here on the other side of the island, I am grateful. I'm thankful that my brother and his wife opened their home to us. But just being here on this side of the island, I'm still homesick. Like, my heart is in Lahaina. I will always have a place in my heart for Lahaina. I mean, Lahaina's home, period.
That was Akanese Vau, who escaped the fire in Lahaina town with her husband and her 3 kids, 15, 13, and 9. This weekend, relatives of the missing frantically search for any sign that their loved ones may still be alive. Maui County Mayor Richard Bisson described the scene in Lahaina in an interview with ABC News Sunday.
The closest thing I can compare it to is perhaps a war zone where maybe a bomb went off. It was cars in the street, doors open, melted to the ground. Most structures no longer exist, and for blocks and blocks of this. I'm familiar with what it looked like growing up here on Maui, especially with my mom working at one of the restaurants there, the Pioneer Inn, for 17 years, and so it doesn't resemble anything that it looked like when I was growing up.
Meanwhile, many residents are asking why Hawaii's outdoor siren warning system, with about 80 alarms on the island of Maui alone, did not get activated to warn the residents about the fire. Hawaii Emergency Management Agency spokesperson told CNN, quote, "Nobody at the state and nobody at the county attempted to activate those sirens based on our records. It was largely a function of how fast the flames were moving. They were trying to coordinate response on the ground." Hawaii officials released a report last year that ranked which natural disasters residents would most likely be threatened by. The list included tsunamis, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions. The risk of wildfires to human life was listed as low. This is Democratic U.S. Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii speaking Sunday.
I'm not going to make any excuses for this tragedy, but the Attorney General has launched a review of what happened with those sirens and some of the other actions that were taken. So that is happening. And there will be time enough, I would say, for those kinds of reviews and investigations to occur.
Hawaii Senator Hirono was speaking on CNN. For more, we go to Kula, Maui, to speak with Kaleikoa Kaeo, a professor of Hawaiian Studies at the University of Hawaii, Maui College. We welcome you to Democracy Now! We were also going to be joined by another guest, but her uncle just died in hospital, which is an indication of the number of people. I mean, right now the number's at 96, but Professor, how much larger, based on your information, knowing friends, family, neighbors, do you think this number is going to go?
Ano ay Kavelina, ano ya ukua pau Amy, Democracy Now, mga Mawine, aloha. To answer your question, unfortunately, what's I myself, what I witnessed, and I myself, in understanding and discussing and talking with others intimate with that situation, as I was told by a high-ranking county official, they hope and they don't expect it to reach as high as 400 to 500. But they would not be surprised. Now, I know that sounds outrageous and sounds high, but we do know there's still hundreds of residents and visitors who are still unaccounted for. So, although we're slowly reaching 100, there are still many, many cars, burnt out cars, and many burnt out structures and homes and buildings that have yet to really be surveyed and looked at. So.
Professor Kaeo, can you talk about the fact that there were no warning sirens? I mean, and you've got this lawsuit now against the electric company. The idea, though it's not exactly clear what happened, that it's these power lines going down in this intense wind that sparked fires. Can you talk about the lack of preparedness?
Yeah, and it's in one way it is lack of preparedness. I guess the intensity of the wind, and and people might not recognize that on Maui at that time, there were 4 major fires that were happening on Maui at that time, Lahaina just being one of them. The Lahaina fire, unfortunately, wasn't aerated. There have been fires in the past, pretty pretty close to where most of the damage occurred. It is very true. I know for a fact that talking with people that I know who were startled, in fact, by the heat and the wind, and were very afraid and were, kind of hunkered down in their apartments at that time, right in the heart of Lahaina. And it was only because of already feeling the heat that was approaching the building that in the very last moments that, I personally know a story of a family, single woman with her children who barely escaped. And really because she had a four-wheel drive truck and was able to kind of climb over, certain parts of the streets and navigate away, and herself barely got out of there alive. And, unfortunately, when she left the apartment and left behind her, she saw and witnessed the destruction and the burning, in fact, of the building and cars and people behind her. So, and she herself said that there was no warning sign, no warning sounds, no one had come around. It was just basically their own instinct and because of feeling the heat that was coming with the wind. And it wasn't just the power of the wind, but it was the heat of the wind that really, made them fear for their lives. And in the last moments, that really, because of sheer luck, was able to escape. And I can say specifically, the following morning, I was able to go by boat and walk right into the major area that had been destroyed. And what I saw was, in fact, many dozens and dozens of telephone poles underground, lines that were still, burning and seemed to be alive. And you could still see the sparkings and so forth right on the street. And many of the homes and buildings, were destroyed to ashes. And so you could really see the intensity of the fire and the wind. And from the accounts that I've heard from the people I've spoke to, as they said, it was as if the wind was on fire. It was as if charcoal itself was blowing. And so, there were many people that I understand who were trapped in their cars also. And, while contemplating, should they try to escape and run through the strong burning wind, or should they stay in their car? And, I think perhaps because of the fear, because of the actual heat of the fire, of the winds, and many of them were unable to escape, from the roads because of those power lines that, because of the strong winds that had fallen upon the streets and the roads, really prevented many people from escaping.
Professor Kaeo, you teach Hawaiian studies at the University of Hawaii, Maui College. Can you tell us what it means to say that Lahaina town, is the capital of the Hawaiian kingdom? Give us a brief history, how Hawaii became a part of the United States and what its relationship is with the mainland. What we should understand about the historic nature of Lahaina town. I find the rest of the media talks about the tourist destination, but there's a reason for that, is because it is so historic.
Yeah, Lahaina is one of those places, some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. It's on the leeward side of the mountain, so it's very warm. It was also a place of lots of water. So this is one of the things also maybe we had a chance to talk about later. Historically, it was the capital in ancient times, from ancient times immemorial, really of the island of Maui, where the seat of government would be held. Many of the highest ranking so-called chiefs held court in Lahaina. In fact, right in the middle of Lahaina was a little island between a little like fishpond lake area called Moku'ula, where the highest ranking chiefs and some of the most sacred items and so-called Akua gods would be housed. And so from time immemorial, Lahaina was always seen as really an important breadbasket of the island of Maui, therefore a central place of the island. And into more modern history, Lahaina specifically was really the capital of the Kingdom of Hawaii, and that's because of its protected and sheltered waters from the ocean, right into the early whaling period, in fact, into the beginning of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And it's really during the Hawaiian Kingdom period that Lahaina starts to play a very important role as a kind of a commercial center for trade, where ships from all over the world would dock and so forth. And so, Lahaina becomes a place where, it's kind of like the crossroads of the Pacific with many ships. And just to kind of add, the royal so-called family being raised in Lahaina during the early 1800s, where Hawaii for a short period, in fact, was a protectorate under British Empire, part of the British Empire. Anyway, and later on in 1839, the first Declaration of Rights, followed by 1840, the first Hawaiian Constitution was written, right, actually in Lahaina. And she really was a seat of the government. People don't recognize the first so-called school, not just in Hawaii and the Pacific, but many times in the context of putting Hawaii within the context of the United States. It said that Lahaina Luna, which is a school, was started in 1831. Is considered the oldest school west of the so-called Rockies. And so, for a long period up into the mid 1850s, Hawaii was seen as, again, the main capital. During that period of growth, especially economic growth, there was a huge transformation where agriculture, and because of the large amounts of water in that area, in fact, the major area in Lahaina, one of the names, in fact, was Waine'e. The word Wai means water. The word Ne'e means to move. Unfortunately, today, most of that water no longer exists due to streams which have been diverted. The transformation of the environment from traditional native plants and so-called forests, which have been replaced first by sugar, and then now unfortunately being replaced by these what we call gentleman estates. These are very wealthy so-called mansions that are built in these areas. And so you can see there's a transformation where Lahaina one time was a very important agricultural center, commercial trade center to the whaling period, and then became a large sugar plantation area. And then in the 1960s, really began the transformation of Lahaina really into a resort area. And so you had the vestiges of this real old kind of sense of a sea town, then slowly being replaced with what becomes commercialized tour-sized centers. And right down the line of Lahaina town, you have Ka'anapali, which is a major, and Kapalu are major resort areas. And so the economy, the population, and the landscape itself was transformed really to meet the needs of mass tourism. And I think that's also one of the issues that you'll find if you look deep enough, you kind of find which cause major transformation of the land itself. And so therefore, and then you compound that, I think, with the issues today you have with global warming and so forth, and you can see the extremes of winds and extremes perhaps of heat and the drying up of the land itself, and the denuding of the land itself, which really helped to spark, really became the tinder for this matchbox that later exploded like a bomb in Lahaina. And, unfortunately and horrifically, our people who have lived there since time immemorial, are suffering because of the consequences that have been, imposed really from outside foreign forces.
In a moment, we're going to speak with the world-renowned climate scientist, Michael Mann. But I wanted to ask you, Professor Kaeo, about the mutual aid on the ground, and also ask you about the demographics of Maui in terms of native Hawaiians, if you can talk about that, and then what kind of help is most needed at this point?
Yeah, so right now it was a very, very slow process and low start, I can say, from the very beginning, just slowly getting aid. And so it's only recently, I'm probably like in the last 24 hours, I would think that you have much of the supplies and aid that's needed has trickled in into the Lahaina area. And I understand, part of it, of course, is difficult because it's still a very dangerous place because of the fires. And so, fortunately enough, because of the work of the community, and I gotta really, really praise our community, both Hawaiian and non-Hawaiian community. Many of people have, again, lived here for generations, and those who have recently moved here, including visitors, have all chipped in and worked hard to show their aloha and love for our place by participating and really providing the kind of supplies. And I was warned by seeing that even when unfortunately, I think government failed in regards to providing the necessities of protection and safety and health for our people. Our people stepped up, and I myself was able to participate in bringing in supplies by boat. So-called by boat, because we weren't allowed to drive into the area, and by boat, much of the supplies had been brought in. And then later on, even by today, by small planes, people started to bring in supplies. Hopefully this continues, and hopefully, whether it's medical concerns or providing the kind of, just bringing in people to come in to look at whether or not we have poisons or we have the ash and the soot and what you might find as remnants from homes and paint and lead and whatever you might have in there.
We just have 30 seconds, but are you concerned in the rebuilding process of Native Hawaiians being pushed out?
That's correct. Yes, I think that's a very important point. My big concern, in fact, has been that really at the forefront or at the head of the table is that the Native Hawaiian population, the families who are from, again, since time immemorial in Lahaina, should be at the forefront in developing, managing, and planning. Not just what's going on now, but really in the revitalization in Lahaina to ensure, in fact, that Native Hawaiian population continues to exist and it doesn't become replaced, as a saying that, this idea that so-called to supplant the native. And I kind of always chant the idea to replant the native into places like Lahaina. And, hopefully we're able to garner enough push and political support to ensure that the community leaders of Lahaina help to define what's best for Lahaina in the future.
Kaleikoa Kaeo, I want to thank you very much for being with us, Professor of Hawaiian Studies at the University of Hawaii, Maui College, speaking to us on Maui.